I've set up my Rigel DSA815 for a test of a cavity filter here. This is to demonstrate both the response of this filter and the ability to save a CSV file for later processing with Excel or other plotting type programs. As you see, I have turned on the tracking generator here. I set the scale per division by using amplitude and scale per division so that I have 0 to 50 dB here, and this is off the bottom. That's why the line's right at the bottom there. And I put this on here, and you see I'm at minus 10 dBm because I've got a 10 dB pad right here. And the next thing I'll want to do is hit the tracking generator so I can get to the normalized screen here. Store this reference. Now I'm looking at 130 megahertz to 150 megahertz. And so this is 130, 140, 150. The cavity that I'm using goes from about 135 to 151, but I won't do that whole range. Just wherever this thing's tuned to is what we'll use for this purpose. Anyway, I've stored the reference, and then I'll hit normalized, hold it down briefly. Oop, didn't take. Okay, and the little box comes up when it's done correctly. So that puts this right at 0 here. That's a 0 reference. Now it says 0 dBm, but really this is dB below that reference, even though it is 0 dBm that's coming out of this output, which is actually minus 10 here because of the 10 dB pad. The pad's there to keep the impedance constant so that we get a nice smooth curve. And even if I turn normalize off, though, of course, you see the curve's not that bad. It's off a little bit here, but not much over that particular frequency range. It's fairly constant. Okay, so we've done the normalization thing, and I want to put this down to here just so I have a little better location. Well, actually, what we could do, I suppose. Now let's leave this here, see what we get. This is the top of the cavity that we're going to use, and this will be the input to the spectrum analyzer. I don't need that anymore. Put this here. And I'll put this here. And you can see our curve on the display here. And that goes from 130 to 150. It's down, looks like 40 dB at 150, about 25 dB at 130. And the peak right there is 134, 36666, so 37 basically. And so that's where this thing's tuned. So let's just save this to a CSV file so we can demonstrate. I mean, I can just hit the print over here and save it, and that would give me a printout of this thing on either into a file or onto a printer, depending on which you use. But I want to save it as a CSV file. So let's first hit save over here, storage over here. This button is storage. Gives me this screen. I have a so-called mobile disk plugged in here, which is really a USB. I'll show you what it looks like. It's just a USB. And you'll see this come up here as soon as it recognizes it. Mobile disk, UDISK connected. All right, now what I need to do is to select that, so I'll come over here and use the down arrow. Notice it takes a little bit of time, so be aware of that. I've got a bunch of things that I've saved here. What I want is not file type is not all, because I'm not trying to save the whole thing. What I'm trying to save is just the trace. So I'll hit trace here. And the format I want is CSV. Here's the CSV files that I've done before. All right, so I'm saving the trace. Okay. I'm saving CSV. And the directory is the mobile disk. So now I should save it in the right place. Now all I have to do is hit save, and I get this box, and we'll name it, I don't know, say T, enter, E, enter, S, enter, T, enter, change to numerics here, and enter 1. So test 1. Hit OK. And it'll tell you, please wait while it assembles all that CSV file. And there you go. Now I've saved it as a CSV file that's on this disk, flash disk, which I can now put into my computer and process with Excel, MathCAD, whatever you wish to use. As you see, we have our frequency information in the first column. It's in Hertz, which is not a very convenient format. And we have the amplitude in dBm. So what I'm going to do is insert another column here and convert the Hertz to megahertz by going equals A3, which is the first cell there, divided by 1 million, which converts Hertz into megahertz. And as you see, we get 130 megahertz out of that. And I'm going to make that, put that in the center by clicking on the centering icon here. Then I'm going to go down and format the cells. So I'll go to number, and the decimal place of 2 is what I'd like to have actually, and that's what the default is. So there we go. Now we can right click again and copy that cell and put it in the rest of the cells below it. First we'll click the first cell here, go down by sliding the slide bar to the bottom, and shift click to highlight that whole area, and then do a right click again and do a paste. And now we have everything in megahertz, as you see. 130, 130.03, 130.07, 130.1, etc. So it's about a 33 kilohertz between each point here, from 130 to 150 megahertz. Then we'll do the same thing we did before by centering up the amplitude here, and sort of shift the columns around by dragging them to format the columns here a little more to my liking. Okay, so we can go through that whole thing. You see we go all the way up to 150 at the bottom, and minus 41.48 at that point, almost 42.5. Then we'll make a chart out of that. We'll make a scatter chart by clicking on the scatter chart and then clicking on this to make the scatter chart. Here we have it. And you see it goes from 125 to 155. So it goes a little beyond what we want. First we'll get rid of this series 1, because we only have one series in this case. We don't need to have that there. Then we'll double click on the top here, and we can change this from 130 to 150, which is the range we're really interested in at the moment. And 150 here. And it puts in 2 megahertz increments, but I think I'll put that at, well, let's see. Maybe that's good enough. I don't know. Let's make it 5. So every 5 megahertz will have a major division. So 130, 135, 140, 145, and 150, as you see. All right. And then on the minor units, we'll do 1 megahertz. It's already at 1. Let's see. Is that what we want? 0.5. Yeah, every half megahertz. I think that'll be a pretty good minor. Now, we don't need 2 decimal places at the top. It only makes things more crowded, so I'm going to make this 0. Have to get rid of link to source. The source was at 2. Now I can set it to 0. And now I have that where I want it in terms of that part of it. But we need also to put the tick marks on there. Well, I like the crosses. So the majors will be crosses, as you see. And the minor will be crosses, as you see. So we have that taken care of. And I want to put the axis labels high so it's out of the chart area. Now we'll look at the vertical here. Every 5 dB we have a major label from 0 to minus 45, or almost 42 on the right side and 26 or so on the left side. And we'll do the same thing. We'll make crosses here on the major and minors. And we don't have to change it. It's already next to the axis, so that we'll just leave that alone. We'll change the scale. Well, let's see. We got 5 and 1. That's probably good scale. So we'll leave that alone. Now if I right click on the area here on the outside of the chart, I get this move chart box. So we'll make a new sheet and we'll call it TWPC, Telewave Pass Cavity 1404-1C for compact. And we'll say bandpass filter or BPF. And we'll say curve because that's what we're plotting here. Oh, it says it already exists. And that's because if you look down at the tabs, you'll see that I already have one that I did. So I'll click no there and make this curve too, just for illustration. Click OK. All right, now we have a bigger representation because it's its own sheet. 130 to 150 there, and 0 to minus 45 with 1 dB tick marks. But I don't like the major line here, the plot line, being quite so thick. So I'm going to go line, weights and arrows. It's 3.25 or 75 now, which is too much. I think 1, I don't know, maybe 1.2, something like that would be okay. Yeah, we'll leave it at 1. And so now we have a little more refined line. Then we'll go to chart layout and click on grid lines. And we have various options here. Major grid lines are an option, minor, and both. I've done both here by clicking on both, which is at the bottom. Then do the same thing on the vertical. We'll do major and minor. So now we have a crosshatch, which helps us if we're trying to find a specific level at a specific frequency. And pretty good resolution. So that's what the grid line box up there is for. under axes. And the weights will make the major ones 1.25. You see how they're highlighted now compared to the minor ones. We'll do the same thing on the vertical ones. We'll click on one of the vertical ones here, 135 here, and weights, and we'll make that 1.25. So now we have vertical lines and horizontal lines that are on the major axes and the minor axes in both planes. Okay, I've gone back to the basic screen here with the data that we took earlier. And I would like to have a higher resolution, well, really not resolution, but a scaled version of the same thing that we just looked at. So let's take the area from let's see here. If I can do this correctly. 130 to 138, which would put 134 in the middle. There's 138 right there. All right. Again, our scatter chart is what we're going to do. Smooth line. And then we'll, once again, we'll double this. It's 128 to 140, which is its own idea of what I want. So we'll change its mind and go 130 to 138. Major units, let's go with half meg. And 0.1 on the minor is what it happened to select. Okay. And tick marks will have crosses on that, and the minor will have crosses on that. Axis labels will put high. All right, and then on this axis, crosses, crosses. Next axis is fine. So okay on that. We'll get rid of this guy. We don't need it. Hit delete. All right, and then we want this chart to be its own area. Wait, that's the wrong thing here. We want to move the chart to TW, PC dash 15, no 14, 04 dash 1C, 130 to 138 megahertz. Okay, all of that's valid, so we'll do that. All right, and then we will go again to the click on chart layout here, and that gives us grid lines here. Horizontal grid lines will have major and minor, and vertical grid lines will make it major and minor. And there we go. We have 130, 130.5, 131, 131.5 all the way across here. And pretty good resolution, and so it's fairly easy to find out where we are on this graph. One thing I'm going to do, however, is I'm going to click on the horizontal major grid line here, and I'm going to change the format there. I'll right click, format the grid lines, and we'll go to weights and arrows, and we'll go from 0.75, we'll make it 1.25, and then do the same thing on the horizontal we'll go weights and arrows from 0.75 to 1.25. And that should do the job there. This resolution here, let's go to scale. We'll make this, instead of 5, we'll make this so, yeah, we can do 1. And we'll make this 0.2, well, I'll leave that at 0.2. That's a good scale considering the resolution here. So there we go. We have a little nicer graph here with a little more ease in figuring out where you are on the graph. So if you're not in Excel where you can use the box here to figure out exactly where you are, you can sort of determine it from the scaling on the edges here if all you have is a printout of this thing. And again, I don't like the heavy line here, so we'll change that. Let's see, double click on it. What did I do? Always can go undo. So we'll right click on this and format, let's see here. We've selected this line, and now we want to go to format, data series, and line here. Not marker line, but line. Weights and arrows. And as you see, that's 3.75, which is more than we want. So, or I want anyway. Don't know what you want. You can do whatever you want. I'll make it 1.25. That's a good solid line, but not too thick. So now we have this chart taken care of here. And you can add a title at the top, and you can add scale information like dB over here if you wish. That's all available in Excel. I don't happen to have to do that because I know that's megahertz, and I know that that's dB. So there you go.